welcome back to part 2 of the Applied Energistics walkthrough tutorial, whatever you want to call it. Today we're going to be going over a little bit of autocrafting and how to do patterns and set up a few different things. I'll go through a couple examples. Really a lot of this, once you get past the basic autocrafting part and into the processing, that's where it gets a little more complicated. Autocrafting is pretty straightforward, but the processing part of it is definitely more in-depth. There's a lot you can do with it, and once you understand the basics of it, you should be able to integrate whatever mods you have into it for the most part. There are a few things you can't put into it that require manual input that you won't be able to autocraft, but I'd say probably 80 to even 95% of things in your mod pack should be able to be integrated with a little bit of ingenuity. So let's go ahead and get into it here. First thing you'll need for any of it is you're going to need a crafting unit. And to make the crafting unit, you'll need 2 calculation processors and a logic processor, along with some glass cable, flux glass cable, and iron ingots. You'll put them in your crafting grid like this, and you'll get a crafting unit. Now you can use the crafting unit by itself without making a monitor. I prefer to have the monitor. I like to be able to see what's going on. So to make the monitor, you'll need to also make a ME level emitter, which is a calculation processor and a redstone torch, so pretty simple. It's really tiny. And you'll also then need to take a illuminated panel or a bright illuminated panel, any of those. Illuminated panel is the easiest to get, so I would say go with that. And ME level emitter, and you'll get the storage monitor. Then you'll take the storage monitor and a crafting unit, put them together, and you'll get the crafting monitor. It does basically the same thing as a crafting unit, but you get to see the items and everything on it whenever it's being crafted. So then the next important part that you need is you'll need at least a 1K crafting storage. You can make a larger one if you want to, but I'm just going to show you the basic on the build here, and it's the same idea for all of them. You'll just need whatever storage component it is going to be and a crafting unit. So just put those together and you'll get the crafting storage, whichever it is. So that is the most basic that you'll need as far as the start of your crafting system. You need a crafting unit at least. I prefer a crafting monitor. You'll need crafting storage, and then you're going to need the items that actually craft it. So then you're going to need a pattern provider. Used to be ME interfaces, but not anymore in 1.18. You'll use pattern providers for that. So you'll need a formation core, annihilation core, 2 crafting tables, and iron ingots. You'll need that to be able to get the actual patterns into the system, and to actually you do the crafting for you need a molecular assembler. Almost the same as the pattern provider. You'll need your annihilation core and formation core, your iron ingots, but the crafting table goes in the middle, and you'll need 2 quartz glass to go on either side here. So you'll need at least 1 of each of those as well. Now the rest of this I'll go over a little bit later. Look at the beginning of this setup here. So you'll have your basic setup here with your drives and your controller and your cables. But you'll just need a setup like this somewhat. Just have your crafting monitors and your storage, and then your pattern provider and your assembler. The assembler needs to be connected to the pattern provider. You can have up to 6 molecular assemblers around this pattern provider. All that really does is just gives it more space to throw the crafts into, so you can speed up the process. But if you're not worried about speed and just doing basic crafts, this is all you'll need. It'll just be able to continually put stuff in there. So as long as your recipe doesn't take more than the slots available in here, you should be fine. It just can take a little while. So I'll show you what we're talking about. We'll go ahead and make a stone sword. To do this, you can see all the stuff in here. You'll need to have the materials, or at least the base materials, which is what you see here. I have going from logs to planks, from planks to sticks, and then we already have cobblestone in the system, so we can connect that all together. So I can show you a little bit of a multi-step there. Before you can get any of this to work, you'll still need you don't necessarily need a pattern access terminal. This is just basically an extra way that you can access all your molecular assemblers and pattern providers to those assemblers, which each of these lines is a pattern provider. And it tells you what they're connected to, so like hopper or molecular assembler or crushing factory. And then you can, without having to go to the actual pattern provider, you can access all that from here, as long as you know which one is which. So this isn't really necessary because you can literally just walk up to the pattern provider. But when you get into larger builds, like we'll show you later over there, you can't reach all your pattern providers. So this will be helpful in those cases. So then this you'll absolutely need. You'll need a pattern encoding terminal. So we'll go over here, we'll talk about that and how to build it. So for pattern encoding terminal, you'll need an engineering processor and a crafting terminal, which we went over in the last video. So you'll just put those together, you'll get a pattern encoding terminal. You also need some blank patterns. Blank patterns, you need 3 glowstone dust, 2 quartz glass, a Certus quartz crystal, and 3 iron ingots. And that'll make you 2 patterns per craft. So you'll need those. And then for the pattern encoding or the pattern access terminal, like I said, you don't necessarily need it, but you just have a pattern provider, an illuminated panel, and an engineering processor. Makes your life easier later. So we'll get to the one last craft. Yes, I know I skipped over it, but that's for later. So then in the encoding terminal, you'll put your blank pattern in this top box right here. You can put up to a whole stack in there. And then you'll just find whatever pattern you want. So right now I have Terra Steel there, but let's just look up the Iron Sword, because that's what we're going to be trying to do. So Iron Sword, you'll click on it. You'll see you move items just like you would if you were crafting it. That's Iron Sword. Why am I looking at Iron Sword? Stone Sword. Anyway, you'll put the items there. It'll show you the pattern. Now, you can't select this. It's just showing you an output. It's not actually crafting it. So then you'll encode the pattern. It'll show you, okay, it's a stone sword. You'll pick it up and place it down. Now, it will look just like a drive when it's in your inventory, unless you click Shift. Then it will show you whatever your patterns are. You can also hover over it. It'll say crafts 1 stone sword with 2 cobblestone, 1 stick, using substitutions. No. You can change on substitutions enabled or disabled. Usually I would say you want to have those on. Right now we don't have to worry about that, but substitution on would help in the situations where you have multiple different sticks and you could use different sticks or different types of stone to be able to make a stone sword, so you don't have to have a specifically cobblestone or specifically a Minecraft original stick. So then you'll take that and then you'll say, okay, I need sticks, but I don't necessarily always have sticks in my inventory. So then you'll go look up sticks and you'll pick the recipe that works for you. So this one is just any type of planks, so you'll select that one and take it down here. Substitutions, yes. And then you'll take, and then you'll say, well, I don't always have planks. I just go around and hit trees with my axe. So then you'll go and find the logs. So since we're using oak logs for this right now, we'll do this. Not logs, planks. I'll get this together, that's fine. So you'll do the planks from your regular logs. And you'll just select that one. And same idea. And then we already have them in here, but we would then place them in the pattern provider that we want. So we'll put it in here with this for the assembler. And then we just go into our system, and you'll want to then find your stone sword. You'll click on it. It'll bring up this little interface here. You can add or subtract how many you want to make. So let's just say I want to make 10 stone swords. You'll click next. It'll say I'm missing sticks or tool rods. Something's wrong with the setup here. Because we're not using because we're using no substitutions. So that's where your problem with that is. So let's just say you have that situation and you want to get rid of it. You can crouch and left click or right click. Yeah, it's right click. And it'll clear that pattern out. So then you can just stick it right back in to do it again. So we'll go back and get that stone sword. We'll select it. We'll make sure substitutions are on. And we'll come back over here and put it in. That's why you want substitutions to be on. So now let's try crafting 10 swords. Alright, so it says that to craft these 10 swords, it needs to craft 12 more sticks from 8 planks with logs and stone that we have. So we'll just click start. It's going to then show in the assembler what's being crafted. And it's done. Now we have 10 stone swords there. So that's the basics of autocrafting. It can be faster the more of these you have. You can also put acceleration cards in these assemblers to make them even faster. For anything super complicated with very long steps, you'll want to also have coprocessors, which are these, and you'll want to make them into a block like this, which I'll show you how to make the coprocessors in a moment. So you'll want to put your crafting monitor in the middle. You'll put a checker pattern of coprocessing units. So I have mine in a cross pattern from the monitor, and then in the corners you'll have your crafting storage. Of course, the bigger crafting storage you have, the more complicated your recipes can be. So then you see here, this is a pretty good pattern of how to be efficient. It's not always the fastest, but it is decently fast and efficient with space and ability, is to checkerboard your pattern providers from your assemblers. And I have a 3x4x3 cube or rectangular cube here that I've dug out around so you can see how it's built. You can build it as big or as small as you want with this. It only takes one access point. This whole thing counts as an entity, just like this only counts as one entity. So you only need one access point to it as well. You don't have to worry about it. I would recommend, if you're doing any of this stuff, run your main cable as dense cable, because you can hold up to 32 channels on it, and then split off with your individual cables off to them. And this under here doesn't have to be a dense cable. It can be a regular cable as well. Just make sure you watch your channels when you're doing this, so that you're not overloading your channels. But as long as you only have one access point to each, it shouldn't overload you too much. Stupid rain. Okay, now that that is off, let's talk about the coprocessor here. So coprocessors, also pretty simple. It's just an engineering processor and a crafting unit, and you can get a coprocessor. It helps with the more complicated crafts and with the multiple pattern providers and so on, so that it can do more crafts at a time. So you'll definitely need those if you want to go beyond a simple setup like this. But this is really all you need to start for basic crafting. Then we'll look at processing. So pretty much any furnace, let me turn this to daytime, it'll be easier to see. So pretty much any furnace or any machine that has an input-output can be very easily set up with this system. All you need is a pattern provider next to it, touching it, and with the input set on the machine to accept from wherever your pattern provider is. Then you'll just put the pattern, you'll just make a pattern for it, which I'll go over here in a second. And when you tell it to send that crafting recipe over, it will then insert the item that it needs. So here for iron dust, it'll take an iron ingot from the system and put it into this crushing factory to make iron dust. Now, it's supposed to take it back into the inventory. It doesn't always. So I'd say just to keep your headache leveled to a minimum, don't worry about using this as a return. Just take an import bus and make it to export to the side that your import bus is on, and just let it send it out that way. As long as your system receives the item, it doesn't matter if it comes back through the pattern provider. You can just use an import bus. And either directly into the cable again, or into something like a ender chest connected into it or something. However you want to set it up, as long as it's receiving from here the item back into the system as soon as it's made, it'll recognize that it's crafted. So same thing over here. I have an infusing factory. It's a little different, requires redstone along with it for this craft, which I have to set up the pattern for iron ingot only, even though we know it needs redstone because it's already in here. Which to do that, I have it auto inputting through an export bus into the system, exporting redstone dust so that it has it into that system. So if you have an item like this, or say that requires a liquid inside of it like Industrial Foregoing does with the dissolution chambers, then you'll want to have a system that separately feeds it the liquid, or in this case is feeding it the item that it needs to its inventory before the craft, because the crafting system doesn't understand how it works. This pattern provider will not be enough at that point. So like for this, I have it solely sending it in by itself. It doesn't have anything to do with this. It just has it sending in to here the redstone for this. So if you have this one for redstone, you have another one for the higher levels, you'll want diamond dust, etc. For the dissolution chambers, then you'll need a system to set up like the latex or something to flow into it manually. You could use this. I've not had any luck with the fluid drives and stuff. But if you've had luck with it, go for it with ME. Otherwise, just set up a standalone system for the latex or liquid to go into the system before setting up your pattern providers and so on. But it will work, and I'll show you how that works. So let's go over here, take a look at processing patterns. So processing patterns are essentially the same idea. That one was the alloy, the infused alloy. So we'll look at that. So for the infused alloy, it shows you have a setup here for it needs redstone here, along with an iron ingot to make the infused alloy. So when you click on it, it's going to take all that information. It's going to say iron ingot, it needs redstone of some sort, and it's confused. It has the liquid amount and it has the item amount. But if it tries to send all that, it's going to try to send it directly into the machine, and it's not going to work. So in this case, and this is where it gets tricky, because sometimes the recipe won't recognize it. But if you click on these to remove them, since you already know that we set up the standalone way for that infuser to get redstone, then we don't need all that. It still recognizes that it's for an infused alloy, so we can just click, and the machine is now going to expect an infused alloy when it sends an iron ingot to that, which it will get because we already have redstone being sent into the infusing chamber. So that's how that works. Now we'll look at. I'll pull up the one for industrial foregoing just because I know that that's another one that is tricky. I can't spell today. Well, let's see, where is it? There they are. So something like a simple machine frame, you need latex and all this other stuff to make a simple machine frame. You can lock this pattern, so say you set it up and you put these items in it and there's a lock button on the actual machine, then that way these are already set to go to those places when sent. Then it knows it needs 2 plastic, a pity machine frame, 2 nether brick, 2 iron ingots, and a gold gear. So you'll see here you need a quarter of a bucket of latex. But you can click on it again, it'll still recognize that it will receive a simple machine frame, and you can make that recipe. And then as long as you already have a standalone system for latex to go into the dissolution chamber, and you have that recipe locked, it'll work. So it takes a little bit of tweaking, like I said, with these processing patterns, but they'll work as long as you know the basics of it. Now another one I'm going to show you is one that really shouldn't work with this, and that's TerraSteel. And there's other, like I said, there's a bunch of different recipes and so on. If you know how to use your mods to work with this, you can Autocraft. It's unconventional, not necessarily the way it was set up to work, but it will work. Now, with this way I have this one set up, I don't recommend trying to craft more than 1 TerraSteel ingot at a time. There's got to be a timer and stuff set up for a better setup. But this is just a basic example of how to use your mods to make something work that isn't really designed to be auto-crafted. So for TerraSteel, when you look at the actual way to make it in Botania, you need your terrestrial agglomeration plate, or however you say that. You'll need mana, and you'll also need a mana diamond, a mana steel ingot, and a mana pearl, all thrown onto that plate with the mana pool nearby. And then you have to wait, and then eventually it'll create a TerraSteel ingot. So that's not very easy to set up. It's not meant to be auto-crafted. Sometimes you can use droppers or systems to throw items on, but you have to use the whole circuit and everything. But it's still not very auto-craftable. But I came up with the system over here. Let me turn it back to day again. Pattern provider onto this hopper, so it'll throw the required materials into the hopper, which then go into this open crate, which is just a way to drop things without having to use a switch or button or anything, onto this conveyor belt. And again, anything that works like this should work. And it drops it onto the terrestrial yeah, that thing. But it drops it onto this plate. We'll just call it a plate for now. Drops it onto this plate. It has the spark, has a mana pool over here with another spark so it can get the mana. And then to pick it up, once it's done, I have an advanced item collector. Again, anything that works in your mod pack like this should work just fine. I have it filtered to only pick TerraSteel ingots up, so it won't grab the materials before they're ready. It goes into a chest, which then is picked up with an import bus and sent back into the system so that we know it's crafted. Like I said, this will not work for more than 1 craft at a time if you use this setup. Unless you can set up a redstone clock lock for this hopper to not let it send more than the set amount of items out before these are ready, because if you add anything else to this plate in the midst of it being done, it will stop the process and will not work. So just an example, don't use this unless you want to just create 1 at a time, but this is to show you how these all work together and how this works together and everything. So I will show you how these 2 different things work. We have a couple crafts. Let's do the TerraSteel ingot first, since it's right here. If you want to see just your craftables without seeing what items you have available, then you can just click this little option here, view. You can see both stored and crafted, so you can see with that plus sign it's craftable. but we already have one here, so when you try to craft, it's going to just pick up the ingot. So if you go to craftable only, you can still craft from it. So let's say that we select 1. Says we have everything available. Start. Let's go look at it. It's all going down the belt onto the plate, and now it's being created. So we'll wait a moment. Let it do its thing. There it did. It got picked up. We'll go back over to the system. Go back to stored and craftable, and we have 2 of them now. So that works. Again, will only work with 1 because you try to craft more. It'll just keep throwing them out through the pattern provider, and you'll end up with more than you can deal with on the plate. So let's take all of this out of here. Now we want for this other example for the pattern providers on the machines, I have an electrolytic separator here to craft. It requires a added part to it, so it'll show you how it crafts the extra things as long as you put all your patterns in. The electrolytic separator, and it needs all these different dusts and so on to make it. So it's going to do all that in that process with those 2 different machines down there. Again, for your recipes, you just type in what you want. So the electrolytic separator. You'd click on it. You make that recipe. Then you also know that you need this, so you make that recipe. And you know that you need this in the center, so you'd make this recipe and then each of the recipes for the dusts. If it's flashing like this to the other ones, you just want to find the one that has a recipe you can use. So this one has a recipe for a crusher. You'll select it, then select your recipe. Basically, when you do these, when you set these up, just make sure you look at your recipe. If there's not a base component like iron or redstone, make it. Even iron, you could automate. I'm not going to show that right now, other than to click on it and show you. But for your smelting, you just tell it, okay, I want to take raw iron from my system, and then you can make an iron ingot. Or even from that, you could make iron ingots from or nuggets from an ingot. As long as you have it down to a base material of whatever you know you're going to have in your system most of the time, then once you get down to that main component, you can stop having to worry about patterns. But get it down to that point for every single possible option. And then you'll be able to just click your button and craft it whenever you want it. So we'll go ahead and tell it to craft this electrolytic separator from all the stuff that we have here. Take a moment. You can see here, it's saying that it's making that. It's crafting this stuff. If you look in here, it'll show you what it's crafting right now, what it's waiting on, and now it's done. So hopefully that is a decent enough explanation. Like I said, the regular crafting itself is not that hard. Even this is just a basic setup here. Even this, other than building it and the resources to make it, is not that hard to get to. This is a little more complicated. You have to know the nuances of your machines and what you're looking for. And this just takes the knowledge of your machines and mods to work together. But as long as you know those, you should be able to make just about anything auto-craftable. So, enjoy, and like and subscribe if you found it useful. Share, and I'll hopefully be making more of these when I can. Sorry it's been a while for this one. Alright, thank you. Bye.